Hi, folks. This is Alan Jones at HiFi Buys. This is HiFi Chats number 22. I am so excited to have Mark Cohen, who is visionary and senior executive at Audeze. I thought his tagline, "Someone remotely important," I thought was awesome. how are you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great, Alan. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, it was great to have you. And I was having a little fun with the remotely part since we're all doing remote things these days. And I realized that wasn't the purpose of that, but I kind of put it in quotations for us in this thing. But anyway, very clever. I love it. I will, for you folks out there, we're going to, with Audeze, we're going to talk about headphones and kind of a little bit of culture. We're going to learn a lot about Mark personally. And so I'm really excited about this. And it's something I've been actually wanting to have on our calendar for quite some time. And again, just really appreciate your time to do so.
Oh, we appreciate the opportunity very much, Alan.
Well, thank you. So guys, if you will out there, please like and subscribe to our channel, either here or on Facebook. And if you will, go to hifibuys.com and sign up for our newsletter so you can be in touch with what we have going on and that kind of thing. And shall we say, we promise not to bomb you with a newsletter every day or twice a day or anything like that. But also last week we had Anders with Hagel on, and that was actually a really interesting conversation. All of the previous HiFi chats are actually on YouTube on the HiFi Buys channel. So if you want to learn some stuff and learn some stuff about the folks in the industry and the culture of the companies and those kind of things, I invite you to do so. We've had quite a bit of followings out there, and it's really kind of exciting. I love everybody learning about everybody else, and it's awesome that we've been able to take this kind of weird time to do this. Also, next week we'll have with Rune. Which I'm very excited about. Rune is some of the best software out there to run products with, and we really enjoy it here at the store and have been selling it pretty much since their inception. Also, if you have any questions, Chris will put up a thing out there for us to ask questions. We encourage them. I'm sure Mark can handle them, so I'm excited about y'all putting them to the test. How's that for an invite for you, Mark?
Dangerous.
Also, if you will, during these times, let's all please just be kind to one another out there. That's all that matters. And we're all God's children, and let's all act that way. Okay. So if we will, I'm going to go ahead and get going. Are you ready, Mark?
Certainly.
Awesome. Awesome. And by the way, I love your setup there. We'll get into this a little bit. So I'm excited about hearing about some of that. But getting to know you, tell us about your family and where you grew up.
I was born in Virginia, and my dad was a commander in the Navy, so we moved around all the time. So even though I was born in Virginia, the reality of it is by the time I was about 10, 12 years old, we had moved permanently to California.
Wow.
And in California, I think if you're here for more than 2 weeks, you're considered a native anyway. So, but he was stationed all over the place. So I ended up living in a lot of different parts of the US and whatever. And it was interesting seeing different parts of the world at a very early age.
That's awesome. You have kids yourself?
Yes, I have two.
Awesome. Awesome. Where are they?
They're about 15 minutes away from here.
That's awesome. You get to see them often.
They're out on the street or anything, but
I didn't think that, sir. I did not think that. That's awesome. That's great that you live close enough to be able to see them and spend some real time together. It's important. Yep. So, so Hobbies. Tell us a little bit about Hobbies.
Well, originally I thought I was going to be a nuclear physicist.
Wow.
And so when I was 9 years old, I realized that it was somewhat difficult for a 9-year-old to get radioactive isotopes to have experiments with. So I sort of focused on electronics. So in those days, that was the beginning of the transistor age, actually. Those were Raytheon CK722s, General Electric 2N107s. And back then you subscribed to a magazine called Popular Electronics.
I remember it well.
They would have one or two do-it-yourself projects. And they'd have a schematic, and they'd have, for lack of a better term, a newbie schematic, which was basically a picture graph, drawings of the part, right, and actually the cables and how you connected them together. So anyone could sort of figure it out. You didn't have to read a schematic to work these things. And most of these things were very simple designs, like a one-tube radio or electric grandmother or something like that. And what would happen is you would get the magazine, you'd build the kit, and then you'd find it doesn't work. And what would happen is every issue, they would make some kind of mistake. Either the drawing would be incorrect, the schematic would be incorrect, the parts value would be incorrect. So you drove yourself crazy till the next month when the next issue came out to see what the corrections were.
so you constantly have these things that you'd have to shove back a month, and wow.
And of course, what happens is as you go through this long enough, you start to realize what does and does not work. So that's really how I learned electronics when I was, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old.
How cool.
And so it's fascinating. And I was fortunate. My father, he really encouraged this kind of thing. He'd buy me all these Heath kits and night kits, if you remember the Allied radio days and whatever. So I used to build all these kits all the time. And I used to try to make radios that could fit into my school books so I could listen to the baseball game during social studies. And
you were that guy.
Yeah, I was that guy. I was that nerd, unfortunately.
You know, what's funny is thinking of those kits, I actually have a Mac kit here in my store, which we don't see many of. And I've also got a Heathkit crossover in the little museum we have here too, with the instruction manual on how to build it and so on and so forth. So it's pretty cool.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
What a neat experience you've had. You want to continue? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. So I thought I was going to be electronics engineer / nuclear physicist. And when I was about 11, 12 years old, I wanted to get a banjo. I don't know why. I think it was like the thing to do. And my parents rented me a banjo, which was typical at that time. They either rented you a banjo or a guitar or some other musical instrument, a flute, you name it. And I started playing the banjo with that famous Pete Seeger, how to play the 5-string banjo book, like everybody else who started banjo. And I started that, and I really kind of got into it. That's when I really got into music. Before then, I enjoyed music, but I wasn't into music. And that really got me started. And I was very lucky. At that time, I lived in Sierra Madre, which was a suburb of Pasadena, California. And there was just a hotbed of musical activity in this whole Southern California area. And Pasadena had one of these old line traditional music stores. And by that, I mean, they had a band instrument department. They had a piano department. They had a musical instrument department. They had, you could buy Fisher HiFi gear there and Tandberg stuff.
Wow.
But more importantly, they had it was a huge facility, and all the upstairs were teaching studios.
Wow.
And what was amazing, and I didn't realize it at the time, I was totally oblivious because, when you're in the middle of something or a vortex or whatever, you don't realize how important that truly is in your life, right? So I was very fortunate. There was, like, for lack of a better phrase, a confluence of events. So I was still like 12 years old or so. So I started taking lessons from this banjo teacher there who was very famous, named David Lindley.
Okay.
And probably most of you watching know him from his work with Linda Ronstadt, or especially Jackson Browne and a lot of other people, and Ry Cooder. Awesome. And so I started taking lessons from David, and he was one of those people who was extremely creative. He was a great player, but he was also so creative, it was crazy. And he really encouraged that side of people. So if you want to do creative things, he was really there for you as a teacher and gave me tons of support. And so I really got into playing the banjo, all styles, frailing, clawhammer, obviously bluegrass style and everything. And I was really into it. And at the same time, of course, you form a band with other people. You got to find a mandolin player, a guitar player.
Right.
And
were you the organizer?
Most of the time I was the organizer, but sometimes I was the side man. It depended on the kind of gig, but typically I try to get a band together and try to get the gigs. So I was kind of lucky in that I sort of had the mentality not to just be a good player, but to actually try to make a living at it.
Wow. And how'd you do it?
And I didn't realize at the time, but as I studied there and kept going into this music store, Berry and Grassmick, I realized that the other teachers up there were amazing. So I don't know how many of you have a jazz background or whatever. So some of the horn teachers up there were Gary Foster, Warren Marsh. And for example, Uh, Donald Fagen of Steely Dan produced one of Warren Marsh's albums.
Wow.
Claire Fisher, the composer, taught music theory and keyboards. Gary Foster was on tons of recording sessions. Then there was Dave Kuntz doing jazz guitar, who played with George Shearing. John Terry, the drummer. Jim Keltner was one of the drum teachers. Jim Keltner, just Google him. He was with Derek and the Dominoes, the Stones, everybody. So I was lucky that I had the influences of all these people, and they were all very nice. And
what an amazing group of people for you to be able to learn from. I mean, wow.
Definitely. And it worked out even more so as I was there, because when I was about 14, and David got a chance to go on a State Department tour with some bluegrass band he had at the time. And he said, "Hey, Mark, I'm going to be leaving for about 6 months on this world tour. I need somebody to take over my students for me." So I was 14 years old, and I took over David Lindley's students.
Holy smokes.
And that was eye-opening, because I never thought I'd want to teach people anything, you know? Right. And I realized that to really be a good teacher for any kind of subject, you have to have some empathy. You have to try to understand the person you're trying to teach. And that was a great learning experience for me. And also, I never really thought too much about exactly what I played, but to be able to teach somebody your skill, you have to be able to break it down and show them exactly how it can be done. So it was an incredible learning experience for me. And of course, while I'm teaching there, in the off hours, I'm hanging out with John Terry and Jim Keltner and Dave Kuntz and Claire Fisher, learning music theory from him, and expanded my, how can I put it, my musical mentality, so to speak, for lack of a better term, to the different kinds of classical music, classical guitar. I started studying flamenco guitar, and of course, as a bluegrass musician, if any of you have any of that kind of background, it seems to be that it's in your blood that you learn all the other bluegrass instruments. So you learn to play guitar and mandolin and bass and whatever. That's sort of, I think, part of the rite of passage if you're going to be a professional bluegrass musician. Yep. And along that time, the band I was in, we were very lucky because we had all these clubs around. We had the Ash Grove, we had the Whiskey A Go-Go, Gazzari's, the Troubadour, the Mint, all these places. Oh, and jazz clubs like Baked Potato, Dante's, where you could go and hear all these great players, the Larry Carltons and the Lee Ritenours, Dave Grusin. I mean, it was just amazing. And as part of that, in the bluegrass field, we became friends with the Kentucky Colonels. And probably most of the watchers don't know about the Kentucky Colonels, but the guitar player from that group was Clarence White, who unfortunately was killed in a car accident early on, but he was a tremendous influence on many, many guitar players. And so all the guys in my bluegrass group, when we were in high school, we were all taking lessons from all the Kentucky Colonels people, like Roland White on mandolin. I took lessons from Clarence on guitar, and Roger Bush, who was the bass player and the front man, actually was a phenomenal Merle Travis style guitar player.
Wow.
And as a matter of fact, I remember my senior class Sadie Hawkins Day dance. My band's mandolin player was sick. Roland White offered to sit in at my Sadie Hawkins Day dance.
Wow. Wow.
So I'm like about 18 years old playing on the stage with Roland White and whatever. And going back to all those people I met at that time, I realized that it seemed like the most talented of these musicians, 99% of them were really nice to newbies.
Yeah.
Or relatively accommodating. It was the people who were maybe not as great that were really obnoxious.
I also find that who you are, in other words, your interest in really learning, has everything to do with how nice people are to you. I
Yeah.
know I've learned that in audio for me here, like, you know, folks like Richard Vanderstein and so on. And I have a real interest in learning. And so it's one of those things where all of them are very, very kind to offer their time really about any time I need it to be able to, you know, learn something or understand why something is done and that kind of thing. So I think it shows a lot about your character and what you really wanted from
And I was just trying to be selfish and gather as much information and talent as possible. I was still young
it.
enough to think if I hung around them, I'd be as talented as they were.
Well, that's what an amazing amount of talent and what a time. My
Yeah,
gosh.
it was incredible. And then came some musical events in my life. For example, when I first started playing bluegrass music, I really thought the bluegrass music was all about the 5-string banjo. Then I heard Ralph Stanley
Wow.
and the Clinch Mountain Boys. And once I heard him sing that lonesome tenor voice,
Mm-hmm.
that was a moment where I realized, wait a minute, it's really about the singing. That's what bluegrass music, it's about that sound. So I realized that, you know, my playing needs to be modified to support that sound, as opposed to showing that, yeah, I can play this fast, this quickly. You know?
That was probably quite a realization for you. It's not about me.
Yeah. I'm not sure if I've quite reached that level yet, but
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's too awesome. Any other hobbies you have? Or does music pretty much eat it up?
electronics, music, photography, cars. I have too many varied interests.
I understand. I'm kind of in the same boat. And a lot of folks in this industry are that very same way. And that's proven out there, I think, on the social media stuff from what I see. So lots of photographers, lots of folks loving cars. Most of them play music instruments, that kind of thing. I see this beautiful recorder back behind us. Tell us about it.
Oh, actually, that is a Fostex E22. That's a 1/2-inch 2-track mastering recorder. I actually used that for a number of sessions. And one of those dubs was of a Larry Carlton recording, as a matter of fact, I did on that. I worked at Fostex at the time. I was one of the 3 founders of Fostex here in the US.
Okay.
And I helped work on that as well. Right below that is a SMPTE timecode reader generator.
Okay.
And I worked on that project as well, and a number of other things for Fostex, and came up with some things like the D20, which was the first DAT recorder that could synchronize to timecode.
Yep.
And so, and I worked on a patent for that.
Wow.
And apparently it embarrassed some people at Sony because they weren't able to come up with synchronizing DAT machines before we were.
Well,
So
just like DSD, they needed a little bit of help too.
Yeah, maybe. But it was fascinating. You know, before that, I had been at Fender, and I was at Fender for 5 years as a product manager, and that was great because I really got to know. I was in the marketing department, but they had actually hired me out of a music store. So there was a section in Pasadena called Old Town, which was just getting started to be rebuilt to what it is today. And myself and 2 other gentlemen had a music store there. And I taught music there, and I was going to law school at the time. And the Fender rep walks in and says, and I wasn't there that day, says to one of my partners, hey, at Fender, you know, we hired a bunch of aerospace engineers. We need somebody who understands technology and engineering, but also knows about music. We need to be able to have somebody communicate with them about product development. And my partner said, you need to talk to Mark Cohen. And so he gave me a call. And, you know, I had hair down to here and everything. And I didn't think I was ever going to work for a big corporation. And CBS had just bought Fender at that time, about 2 years previously. Mm-hmm. And CBS also at that time owned Creative Playthings, X-Acto knives. They had, of course, Rhodes electric pianos, Rogers drums. They owned Steinway. They owned Leslie organs. They owned Road and Track magazine. So it's a huge conglomerate. And being, you know, the prototypical child of the 60s, I never thought I'd be working for a big corporation. But, you know, it worked out great, and they were good to me. I got to travel around the world doing seminars and training for all these people in all these different countries, and met a lot of great engineering people. And at that time, there was a downturn in the aerospace industry. So a lot of people in the music business, like Norland, who owned Gibson at that time, hired these unemployed aerospace engineers who were brilliant, but knew nothing about music.
Right.
So Fender at that time bought one of the very first spectrum analyzers, or a fast Fourier transform machine. So finally, you could start to see the spectral content of the music on a screen.
Yep.
And so it's easier to explain to engineers what the musician was looking for, because, you know, Alan, on the audio side, hi-fi is all about sound reproduction.
Right.
On the MI side, musical instrument side, sound quality is all about sound production.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get the sound you want? And so what would happen to the engineers is that a musician would say, it has too much bass. But did that mean it had really too much bass or not enough treble?
Right. Right.
So how do you communicate?
It's the old tilt.
Yeah, exactly. So it's fascinating. And when I was there, I was there with Freddie Tavares, who's one of the original guys with Leo Fender at that time. Gene Fields, who did the Starcaster guitar. I helped design that with him. Also Seth Lover, the guy who was the father of the humbucking pickup. So Seth Lover was there. So I learned about pickup design from Seth, working side by side with him, about guitars from Freddie Tavares. It was a fascinating time. And of course, I was in charge of developing new products, so I'd have to go out and have these new product designs field tested. Mm-hmm. So I connected with great players like Larry Carlton, Robin Ford, Lee Ritenour, you name it, and would bring over instruments. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? And all these people were really helpful, and they're very welcoming. Larry and I became pretty close, and as a matter of fact, now I just remembered. So when Larry was going to have his son Travis, he gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm going to have a son, blah blah blah." So I thought I'd give him a birthday newborn gift. So I had a copy of a Gibson 335 made, because that was Larry Carlton's known guitar at the time. I had a small one made about this big, and ironically I had it made in the Fender model shop.
Wow.
But here's another angle. The guy who made that was John Page, who went on to do the Fender custom shop, built all those Fender custom guitars, and now has John Page Guitars as a business.
Wow. You were smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah, I was very lucky. And so anyway, I met a lot of great people, and people like Harvey Mason, the drummer who plays with Foreplay, and Herbie Hancock and everybody. He really helped me get into the studio scene when one really, really well-known banjo player couldn't make it for a Toyota commercial session. And Harvey, being the A-list player, major session player, said, "Hey, I know a guy." Mm-hmm. And got me to the session, and that was the beginning of doing a lot of session work. So I was very fortunate. Once again, getting back to that phrase, a confluence of events.
But when you think about that, all the influence that you had around you, must have had a very profound effect on your life all the way through it. Wow, what a time.
Yep.
Very exciting for you. That's awesome. So we've kind of talked a little bit about life experiences, I guess, already, but one of my questions is things that have had an impact on who you are.
I'd say a lot of the talented people I met, and are still meeting, as a matter of fact. It never stops. If you want to keep learning, it just simply never stops.
Totally agree.
But, hanging out with Larry Carlton, people like that, Harvey Mason, and then, seeing and hearing Paco de Lucia for the first time. Mm-hmm. And Jaco Pastores, who I met when I was at Fender, and hearing what you could do, all that, it changes you and your perception. Oh, you can do that. You can make that sound. These things are possible.
There's a lot of wows in music, isn't there?
Yep. And also in electronics. I was fortunate. After I left Fender, I went to work for SAE, Scientific Audio Electronics. And that was Morris Kessler's company at the time. And they, along with Marantz and McIntosh, were the top 3 US high-end audiophile manufacturers.
Yep.
And he brought me in to do pro audio products. And through him, I met Jim Bongiorno, who went on to do Great American Sound or whatever. But
Yep.
also he brought on a great engineer named Barry Thornton, who I ended up working on other products later on in my life with. And with Barry Thornton, we did an amplifier for pro audio called the P50. And it was really ahead of its time. So it was only one U-High, one rack space. It was the first fan-cooled one rack space power amp.
Wow.
It was the first pro power amp that was fully complementary symmetry designed from input to output. It had built-in high and low pass filters, so you could have a couple of these and configure for biamp or triamp situations. And it had 3 input jacks on the back, left, right, and mono. So you didn't have to move any switches. You simply plugged a cable
Where you want it,
and switched it to mono. So this thing would put out 220 watts in one rack space.
Wow.
Mono. And what helped us was that there was this little group just getting started doing a lot of touring, and they bought about 80 of these, and they were called the Police.
Wow.
So,
wow.
So meeting Barry, and then, you know, there's so many engineers I met, both on the software side, firmware, as well as hardware side. And you learn about these things, but also you got to, you know, you learn from both, how can I put it, positive experiences and negative experiences. Like you learn that just coming up with a great idea doesn't mean you're going to be successful.
Correct. Execution.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, back in those days, the deal is Toyota, who had great execution, used to readily invite any other car manufacturer to come to its factory to see what it was doing. They would share everything with them. And I'd say, why do you do that? And they said, well, because we don't think anyone will still be able to execute as well as we do. As well as we do. So it's really all about not just getting the great idea, having the vision, because you have to have the vision.
Yep.
But then how do you make that into a practical product? And how can you manufacture that in quantity and with high reliability?
Right.
And those are all challenges along the way. And some people are good at it, or I should say some companies are good at it, and some aren't as good.
And even repeatability, having the same sonics out of the same product.
Yep.
And there's quite a bit to it. I get asked a lot, well, why don't they do this? And I always tell them, I said, we never know till you're on that side of the road. So, there's always reasons why companies are doing things and why they're not. And so that it's kind of like my statement that I kind of say every time is basically it's culture that creates that products and those type of things that you're speaking of. And obviously you're quite the visionary. And so anyway, it's awesome seeing that in you.
Well, thank you. No, I've been very fortunate. I've had the opportunity.
I think you have too, but we make our own fortune. I'm not going to say that some people don't just fall in it, but that's pretty rare. Normally, people make up what's going on in them. So your first time in front of a system where you just went, wow.
Magnepan Timpani 3s.
Boy, there's quite a few people that had that first experience that way.
Yeah, and I may share that with Stax electrostatic SRX 2s.
Yep.
So between those two, those were things I said, wow. But really, even though I like the Stax electrostatics, and I still do to this day, I still have a pair, man, something about those Magnepan Timpani 3s. And it's one of those things along with those Apogee ribbons. If you have them set up right, and that can be a challenge in and of itself.
Yes.
But if you have it set up right, there's that how can I explain it? Some magical thing happens that you just go, oh yeah, that's it.
And the little chills on your arms and things along that's when those moments happen. It's pretty amazing.
And it was Joni Mitchell's Court and Spark playing at that time. I heard that. I just
wow. So we have a HiFi Chats playlist that basically we will be putting that song on. And so any of the music that you mentioned here today, we'll be putting it on there. I want to ask you guys out there, if you will, to like and subscribe to the channel here, both on Facebook and on YouTube, if you will. Also go to HiFiBuys.com and sign up for the newsletter. Next week, we're going to have Eno with Rune, which is really great software to manage music libraries, streaming and local. And last week we had Anders with Hagel on, which was also a very interesting conversation. Also, if you will, please, any questions, there's a spot out there, I believe to your right, where you can ask questions. So please ask away. I know that John would like to take care of them, and I think y'all can see he's pretty capable of doing so. Tell us about a particular piece of music that moves you and why, and how did you find it?
Oh, there's so much. I mean,
I know it's a sea.
Yeah, and especially if you have a varied interest palette. If you're just into bluegrass, or if you're just into the rock, that's one thing. But if really ultimately about music, it's about how do you express emotion to another person or a group of people, and some artists as well as some recordings, they're not always the same thing,
right?
Are capable of doing that. So I made a list of a couple things that may not be familiar to your listeners or viewers.
That's fantastic.
Everybody's heard the normal stuff. And one of the things I like about doing trade shows is I like to see what other people are listening to, because I want to see what other things are out there, and get that exposure. So here's something that's really interesting and can send those chills up your spine type moments. And that's a Korean singer named Yoon Sung Ma. It's Y-O-U-N, S-U-N, last name Na, N-A-H. But the song is called Calypso Blues. And it's just vocal and upright bass.
Wow.
And you would think it doesn't work, but it does. But her vocal quality, and you hear and almost feel her breathing in to make a sound. And then the upright bass, the sound of the fingerboard comes through, and the whole tonality of the upright bass. So I think it's a great track to listen to for both sonically as well as artistic reasons. And it's very well recorded. It's not overly produced. Another thing people might find interesting is a Michael Jackson song, Billie Jean, which everybody's done. Yep. But there's a group called the Civil Wars, just like you think it's spelled, the Civil Wars. It's just vocal and acoustic guitar. And once again, not overly produced, but the recording, the emotion is really excellent. I'm a big Al Di Meola fan.
Yes, me too.
And I think if you want something that will help show off the spatial quality of the music, his track La Luvia, L-A-L-U-V-I-A, is very impressive, but you start getting carried away because the playing is so expressive, and it's just an amazing track. Marcus Miller, there's a track he does where he plays bass on 2 tracks. It's Lost Without You, the Robin Thicke song.
Okay.
So in one track, he's comping the bass. The other, he's playing the typical bass line. For headphone guys, it'll be amazing because you'll really feel that bass, especially obviously on the Audeze headphones. But for the speaker people, what's important is that if you have a good system, you will truly hear the bass as 2 separate tracks.
Awesome.
Whereas normally a lot of systems, the bass kind of sounds as sort of one big ball kind of stuck in the middle of the mix. But on this particular track, it's 2 separate ones. If you want something more R&B, there's Drizabone, D-R-I-Z-A-B-O-N-E, called Real Love. They have a live version. You may want to try that.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. One of the reasons I love this business is all the music that gets shared with me by the folks that walk through the store and on these live chats as well. And gosh, I mean, sharing that music back and forth is kind of what makes us all tick. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here.
Definitely makes it more interesting. It expands your horizon as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wish I had more time here at the store sometimes to take these things and go listen to them, but I tend to have a pretty busy day. So, by the way, I wanted to let everybody know it's Wild Shirt Friday.
Dressed appropriately, right?
Oh my gosh. My girl bought me this shirt. So anyway, this was when everybody on Netflix was watching The Lion Dude. So anyway, love the shirt. Love the shirt.
Thank you.
All right. So tell us a little bit about who is or are your mentors in this business and life?
Oh, just about everybody. What I realized is that you can learn from everybody, even if it's a good or a bad situation. I mean, we have to learn from both the positive and the negative. You have to learn what doesn't work as well as what does work.
Agreed.
And you have to be able to fail. In other words, if you haven't had the experience of screwing up a product or failing a company or whatever, you really can't grow from that. If you just, and always, it's hard to really get a sense of self, I think, if you've always been in, how can I put it, the uptick. Just like it's hard to be able to laugh if you also can't feel some pain along the way too, right?
Totally agree.
So, but that's my personal philosophy. Other people may have a completely different philosophy.
Well, now I know why I have my business open for 25 years plus. It's all the failure before it.
Well, that does prepare you.
It does. I mean, I have no problem saying it. I went through a lot, and at the same time, I was dyslexic. And so I GED'd when I was about 17 and a half, and I was not a very good test taker. I loved learning and learned it all, just couldn't take the test. So it was not a great time in my life because school, this is how you do it and how you succeed is that way. And it just wasn't that way. So
that could have been brutal.
I look at all that as past, and also gave me some other great abilities in my life that I didn't realize until a little bit later. But with everything, you get something when something's taken away, so it's always awesome. So it's kind of like I tell folks: if you lose your sight, you get your ears, and so it's. Anyway, I really like how you talk about that. Just failures is what makes, you execute properly. And so I think it's amazing the amount of lessons that we learn from those times.
Yeah.
So.
And actually learn that lesson rather than keep repeating the failures.
Well, it sounds to me like you've been pretty successful through it all. I mean, the jobs you've had and the people you've been around and that kind of thing is just absolutely amazing. So tell us about your path to Audeze.
Oh, that's long and maybe actually excruciating to hear.
Can you give us a shorter version of it, maybe?
Yeah. So I went from Fender to SAE. Then I went to Fostex, the recording equipment company, and did that for about maybe 10, 12 years. And then from that, I kind of retired and started working on just different things I thought would be interesting. And I did a lot of international sales business for companies that had no exposure, such as Avalon Designs, who you may know from Pro Audio, Millennium Media. And then there was Blue Microphones. I met Skipper and Martins of Blue when they first started and I said, you guys need me, and started to grow that company. And I gave them the idea for the Snowball. Originally, it was going to be a Firewire based microphone to plug into a Mac, and it ended up being USB, and I'd long gone by then, and did a lot of things. I also worked a lot in the computer industry, like doing network attached storage servers, storage area networks, designing TCP IP offload engines for storage, and enterprise software. Still kept my hand kind of in audio, doing different things. The
nuclear industry
for Apple, did the first Firewire external cameras for Apple, was an Apple certified developer. Tried another.
All I can say is the nuclear folks missed out.
Yeah, no. Believe me. And then and a bunch of other things came along. And then I was at Monster when Beats was at Monster. And so Noel Lee of Monster contacted me. We had known each other from way back when. And he asked me to fix the Beats problems, because at that time, it was still early on in Beats, and there were problems with some of the designs. So he asked me to come in and not so much work on Beats originally, but revamp his power and cable business, because that had gone south since Beats was taking over so much of everybody's time.
Right.
I was there 2 weeks, and Noel calls me and says, Mark, you're the only one who's done headphones before. Because ironically, going back in time, when I was at Fostex, I worked on the original Fostex ribbon or planar headphones, the T20s,
Okay, I
T50s,
remember
et
those.
cetera, way back when. So it's interesting that after all this time, I'm now sort of full circle back at Audeze doing planar magnetic drivers.
Isn't that wild? Wow.
So, because I was one of the few people that had that technology. So anyway, so I worked on the beat stuff for him as well as some power stuff and whatever. And I was there a couple of years, and then I didn't want to move up permanently to San Francisco because I had young kids down here in Southern California.
Yep.
So I said goodbye, and shortly after that. Oh, and I was involved with Tiffany right before that, come to think of it. Tiffany, the original Tiffany had some new designs for drivers, like magnetic suspension transducers and whatever. And I was part of the organization that bought out ScanSpeak, Vifa, and Peerless.
Okay.
So
Wow.
I got to meet all the ScanSpeak engineers, and that was really fascinating, and worked with them for a while.
Great
and,
driver company. My gosh.
Yeah. And I did their biggest deal they'd ever had in the history of their company. And I worked on developing the beryllium tweeter for Revell.
Wow.
So the original Revell B tweeter was from ScanSpeak, but they had a lot of input, especially the wave guide that was entirely on their side. So anyway, then went Monster, left Monster, and then I knew Drog Kolich, who's CTO here of Audeze. And I'd known him from some other work I'd done in the speaker business prior to this. And Drog reached out to me and said, hey, we just got some funding. This was Audeze, and we need somebody to help out. And came in, I met the original founders, which was Drog and Alex Rossin and Shankar Thiagasamudram. And I've been here for almost 7 years now.
Wow. Wow, you're planted for a while.
So, or they won't let me leave.
So, somebody out there on our channel remarked that someone said they feel like they need to get out and do something with their life after listening to you.
Well, I don't know about that. It is a little crazy making, but I've been both fortunate and unfortunate. Probably if I'd stayed with one company for a long time, I might be better off. But I always like learning something new and also seeing a challenge. And that's why I couldn't stay at Fender after 5 years. It was just, I wasn't learning anything new. And I was fortunate, to be honest. I'd made enough money where I could do other things. I did a lot of startups, which I did not touch on during this conversation so far. So I worked on a lot of startups because a lot of people didn't know how to take something from a garage and make it into a real business.
Right.
So
that's the hardest step in the world, and we see so many fail.
Yep.
It's part of the reasons I can't do anything with a company that is of that size, because I can't protect my customer.
Yeah.
And so I have to let them kind of become a real company before I can actually have, that kind of relationship with them. So, but that's awesome, because obviously your experience is vast and they get a lot from it. And, I think that's, it's some of the most important steps. I remember when I went from a small, just me and my ex, and, we opened a store, started selling used gear, and then it got bigger than us, and I needed to hire people, and then we needed to have insurance and vacations and all this other stuff. And now I've got, 9 people and so on with me. And so it's it's always different as you grow and grow. And but I do think that the culture and the hires that you make are have an awful lot to do with everything. So, and the fact that you need to have an open mind to allow others to influence you.
Yeah, and as you probably found out, if you really want to grow your business, you have to get the best people.
Yep.
Finding the cheapest people isn't the solution. You always want to find the best people.
I went down that road.
Yeah.
I tried that, didn't work. So,
but the corollary to that is you have to know to hire the best people. In other words, my philosophy that I've learned along the years is, if you don't already know how to do that person's job, how do you expect to hire the best person for that job?
Yep.
So if I'm going to hire a mechanical engineer, they better be a better mechanical engineer than I am. If I'm going to hire somebody for account supervision, they've got to be better at it than I am. I think that's the philosophy you have to have if you really want to grow your business. And plus, you want to be able to learn from other people.
Yep. Well, I remember when the lady that was taking care of my books and did all the ordering and that kind of thing texted me one day and said, I'm no longer coming in. And it was a frightening day because I had never placed an order, nor have I paid anything.
Oh.
So I'm really not a big fan of money. I realize it's a necessary thing, but I try not to touch it. And so it's one of those things that just keeps me in the right place.
Yeah.
And anyway, so I had to go learn how to do all that before I could hire somebody. And that was certainly a good lesson for me in that regard too.
So exactly.
Anyway, great advice. So let me ask you, what are the main reasons that Audeze is who they are and not what they are?
It's really because of the people. And it's also because of improvements in the technology. So the people involved here, Shankar, Drog, let's forget about me. They're really good. We're basically a very small company. There's not a whole lot of people who make decisions around here. We don't have people walking around with white tab collar shirts and thin black ties. There's not a lot of those.
Okay.
And
guys in wild shirts, though.
Yeah, right. There you go. And we're here in Southern California, and everything is here. So I'm actually in our conference room. If I would go across the hall to my left, I'm in the factory.
Wow.
And so I can go yell at the production engineer or whatever. Upstairs, we have all the engineering. So Drog and his team, Sloba, mechanical engineers, they're all upstairs. All the drivers are made here. So we make almost all of our headphones here, with the exception of the really high volume headphones, like the Mobius, for example,
okay,
and the frame of the LCD1.
Okay.
But we still make all the drivers here. So even though, for example, the Mobius, we actually have made for us by a factory in China, because we don't have the production volume here, we actually make the drivers here, ship them over to that factory.
Wow.
So we don't rely on some factory over there to make the drivers for over there. That would be, how can I put it? That would be the cost accountant's plan.
Yes.
And we could probably save a few bucks, but really we think we have to have the ultimate control over the technology and over the production and the reliability of the product. So for example, the LCD1, we just had the shell made in China, but everything else is built here and tested.
Okay.
But all the regular LCD series that you've grown to know and love, or whatever, seen around, all these are all made here.
Awesome.
So it's really about the people, a lot about the culture. But one thing that really helped us was NASA.
Okay.
So some years ago, a few years before we got started, NASA developed a new type of polymer for solar sails. And let's go back in time to my days at Fostex doing the T20s. Those headphones were great. A lot of people loved them, but what would happen, because of the polymers in those days, they would use the film, the thin film. The smog would deteriorate the film. So, and probably anyone who has some of those older headphones, heaven forbid, they probably realized after about 2 or 3 years, the high frequencies started rolling off. And that was simply because of the film at that time.
Wow.
Now, with the solar sails type film that NASA came up with, Shankar was able to, how can I put it, glom onto that and go, hey, let's use this because it's a very stable film. And they use this as the basis for flexible circuit boards. So if you're going to design a missile and need a circuit board to go from one wing over a fuselage to the other wing and withstand the G-forces and the vibrations, you need a very special material.
That's pretty stable.
Yeah, and regular FR4 is not going to do that.
No.
First of all, it's not going to bend.
Holy smokes.
So
well, what a great find.
Yeah, we were able to take advantage of the technology and really run with it and expand upon that. So we've actually expanded on that considerably since the original NASA developments. As a matter of fact, we don't even extrude the film. We actually cast the film that we use.
Really?
There's a huge machine about as long as a football field or soccer field, depending where you're from.
Okay.
And the film is actually cast.
Holy smokes.
And because that's the way it has to be done to get this type of film in this type of way. And anyway, so it's kind of different than what most of the other manufacturers do. And we spent a lot of money here at Audeze on basic research. So we have a number of patents. For a headphone company, we have quite a few patents. Obviously, Sennheiser's has been around a long time. They have a lot of patents. Bose has a lot of patents, but most of them are in noise cancellation as opposed to driver design.
Right.
So we, besides the technology we developed for the film, and we don't readily, talk about the details of the film itself, but we've come across some other technologies as well. One of the things we've done is we have what's called, I don't know if you'll be able to see it right. I'll try to get the right angle correct.
No, that's great.
This is a driver out of, it looks like one of our older sign on-ear headphones. Mm-hmm. So it's smaller than our regular 100 millimeter or 4-inch diameter drivers of the regular LCDs. And by the way, for those, let me go back a step. I realize maybe not everyone watching knows what a planar driver is or a thin film diaphragm is. So a regular driver that you see in a headphone is very similar to a conventional speaker driver, or as you would call it generically, a moving coil driver. So in that you have a surround, you have a cone, you have a frame, you have a spider, you have glue in all these different sections, you have a voice coil, you have you have a magnet, you have inductance created here. So all these things are involved in a conventional driver. This is like a thin piece of saran wrap. So you've all had experience with saran wrap. It's very, very thin. So because it's so thin and light, it has little mass and it's very easy to move. Mm-hmm. So if you have enough magnetic flux, you can really get the best impulse response or transient response out of a planar type driver compared to 99.9% of all moving coil drivers. That doesn't mean you can't make great moving coil drivers that sound excellent for headphones. It's just that it's a much harder thing to do. Right. So the planar type drivers, whether they be electrostatic, which is not quite a true planar, but the similar ilk, they all should have very good impulse response. And by that, I mean, if you pop the strings on the bass, if you hit a snare, strum acoustic guitar, have a grenade explosion, all those things, that initial wave front, the shock wave that hits you, should be much more accurate or time aligned or time arrival correct on a planar driver. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you can't also make bad planar drivers, but
that's true.
But assuming you know what you're doing, these have a lot of advantages. Disadvantages, to be perfectly honest, is that in general, once again, great generality, planar drivers tend to be a little less sensitive than a moving coil driver. Once again, not always true. Like with our LCD1, that would be an exception to the rule. Yep. So let's get back to the actual design. So this is actually a piece of FR4, which you're familiar with. This is what they use most circuit boards for. Mm-hmm. That actually simply acts as a frame. And the material here has, we've got a metallic foil that's laminated to the original polymer material. And if the light hits it right, you'll see the striations in it. Yep.
We've seen them, not right now, but we've seen them.
And so those are the actual voice coils. That's the voice coil winding on the driver itself. So instead of having a separate voice coil that you'd have with a conventional driver, the voice coil is actually on the planar element itself. Yep. Now, the other thing we do that you won't see on this because it's too hard to see, but we actually vary the widths or the tracing of these voice coil patterns. Okay. And that's to make sure that they match. Like if here's the whole thing.
Yeah.
Front and back. I'll take the front off. Here's the other side. Here's where the magnets are.
Yep.
So what you want to do is have the voice coil traces wider and narrower depending where the magnets are, so you get even flex density across the entire diaphragm.
And one advantage you have with that driver and making sure that you do have that density across the diaphragm is you have a very large diaphragm delivering the sound. So it allows you basically to be able to have a more relaxed driver doing that because you have more area moving.
Yep. Yeah. And generally speaking, the more area you can move, well, as Godzilla used to say, size is everything. And most headphone drivers are anywhere between 25 millimeter to maybe 50, or I think Sony had some 70 millimeter drivers. But these are in our regular series speakers, they're 100 millimeter drivers.
Wow.
So that's 4 inches in diameter. So size does help in this case.
Yep.
So that's kind of the basic thing. If you look at the larger driver, so I talked about the voice coil design. This is a driver out of an LCD-X, for example. So it's got this metal frame. What you see here are what we call the phasers. So your speaker fans would consider these to be waveguides.
Yep.
And these help smooth out the mid-range. And for your viewers who might have had original LCD2s from Audeze, they did not used to have the phasers here.
Okay.
We made a revision about 7 years ago to add the phasers to the LCD2, and that smoothed out the mid-range. Some people still say they prefer the original one, but everybody's different.
As we've learned.
Yep. And actually, maybe that touches on perhaps an important point. What we found is that, and we talked to a lot of our customers, because I don't know if this is true of most of the other headphone companies, but we find that a lot of our customers or potential buyers want to call us and speak to us directly before they make a decision, or maybe after and they have some questions. So we end up talking to a lot of our customers directly. And I talk to a fair amount of them myself. And I would say, at least anecdotally, I have no exact numbers, but anecdotally, about 30% of the people that we've talked to have some kind of hearing issue. And by hearing issue, it could be anywhere between simply it's tinnitus or tinnitus, as some people used to call it. It could be a difference in level between your left and right ears, which, by the way, is one of the reasons why I personally kind of prefer headphone amps that have a balance control. Because with speakers, you don't have to worry about that. Headphones, it becomes a more critical issue.
Yep.
Also, some people may on one side have a presence peak, but they don't have it on the other side. Also, your ears are physically different from your left to right side. So everybody is truly different. And it's easy to understand how people think one type of headphone sounds really good and another type of headphone that may be engineered every bit as well, they don't like.
Yep. Well, they also have very personal devices, and a lot of it has to do with the fit and that kind of thing, and how comfortable they are on your head. And y'all have actually some, they are a little heavier than some of the headphones, but you have a very, very comfortable frame that you're putting around your head, and the pads are just really, really comfortable.
Yep. Also, and good point, depending on how your ears are and your head shape, the cup and the ceiling makes a huge difference. How's the bass response? Some headphones are more sensitive to that, some are not. So everybody is, has a tremendous, how can I put it, curve
Yep.
in terms of what people like or don't like. So it is fascinating.
We set up a headphone bar here about a year, I'm going to say, I think a little over a year ago. And so we've got about 16 stations with headphones from about $99 all the way up to the LCD4s. And you end up finding it's just been kind of an amazing experience watching folks come in, try them, see the different experiences that different folks have. And you are right, it is kind of all over the map. And I never really associated it to how different people's ears are and that kind of thing. And because they're right on their ear, it probably has more of a difference than it does with speakers in a room.
Yep, absolutely, totally different listening experience. As a matter of fact, I'll get into the differences in the sounds of our different models in a little bit. Let me talk a little bit more about some of our other patents.
Okay.
So one thing, as I showed you before, these are actually where some of the magnets are. Actually, that's exactly where the magnets are on this particular model. So what I've done here is, these are two magnets. Like we could have anywhere between 8 to 12 magnets on a headphone, depending on the model. Now, as we all remember from high school, elementary school, Montessori, whatever, Uh, Magnets have a North Pole and a South Pole.
Yep.
And you usually have even distribution of the magnetic flux or the magnet power. What we were able to do with our flux or magnet patent is we actually imagine you could take one side, bend it over and touch the other side. So almost all the power of the magnet or the flux density is on just one side.
Wow.
And no one else had done this. We were kind of surprised that no one had done this before, to be perfectly honest with you. And this has other applications. You could use this for magnets in linear motor drives for hard disk drives, for example.
Okay.
Work for that.
Back to
really
your
well.
computer experience.
Yeah. So this enables us to either make a magnet that's the same size, that's twice as powerful, or half the size that is just as powerful. And I can't really demonstrate it here. You have to physically feel it. But if I use one side of the magnet,
wow,
you can kind of hear it snap on and off. But if I do the other side, it's
wow.
much louder. And and you really have to work to pull these apart.
Wow.
So it's something you can, I can, how can I put it? I can give you a technical white paper on it. I can talk about it, but till you actually feel it, you don't quite understand, you know?
Well, that's really interesting. That's quite a technology. That's what a wonderful patent for you to have.
And we took our waveguide technology we had here, we made a patent to put it in our in-ears. So if any of you had an experience with our iSign 10, iSign 20, our LCD i3s or LCD i4s, those all have a waveguide down that throat. And that's one of the reasons they sound as good as they do.
So y'all have been, that's one of the reasons why you've been able to make a little lighter set of headphones is because of that patent as well.
Yeah, that helps. But also, to be technically correct, because we have a large surface area, we have to have that magnetic density over the entire surface area.
Okay.
So let's take an example. The Bayer T1, I think they advertise they have 1.5 Tesla of magnetic flux, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. But mind you, they only have to have it over the voice coil.
Right.
Which is maybe what, 8 millimeter, 10 millimeter? I forgot this. Not very much. Right. We do 1.5 Tesla on our, where are they? Here we go. Our LCD4s, we have 1.5 Tesla over the entire 100 millimeter area.
Holy smokes.
So
you have absolute control over that entire, you have absolute control over that entire diaphragm.
Yep. But that's one of the reasons we're able to get that bass response. And by bass response, I don't mean that we have big bass, but rather if you notice our response curves from like 900 Hertz on down to 20 to 12 Hertz, depending on the model, they are almost always ruler flat. But more importantly, like if you were to listen to that Marcus Miller bass track, you would actually have some, how can I put it? The physical palpability of the bass that you perceive, which is hard on a headphone. Most headphones, you hear the bass, but you don't have the physicality of the bass. That doesn't come across, but it does on
presence. Yep. Yes. Or I call texture a lot of ways, but.
or better yet, I think the phrase is that the Harvard MBA term is get up and dance.
There you go. I love that. That's what music's supposed to make us do.
Exactly.
And it does. That's awesome. Well, let's get into a little bit of the product specifically. And unless you have do you have other things you want to show us before we get there?
I got plenty, but let's not run out of time. Let's go over some of the products and I'll make it as painless as possible. All right.
Okay. Sounds great. Can we, let's see, you want to start off? Where are we starting?
I'm going to start off with our original headphone, and that's the LCD2 Bamboo.
Fantastic.
And what I would suggest is actually, let's see, where's the LCD3? So here's the LCD2, our original model. And then the second model we came up with is the LCD3. Okay. LCD2 has 70 ohms impedance. This has 110 ohms. This has a little more resolution than the LCD2. Now, what has happened with Audeze is we actually have two different family tonalities. for lack of a better term. And so for any viewers watching this who want to take a listen, the original headphones we have, LCD2 and LCD3, are slightly warm in the mid-range.
Okay.
The LCD2 would be the warmest of all our products in the mid-range. Now, it still goes out to 40 kilohertz. So I say it's warm in mid-range doesn't mean the highs are rolled off. The highs are still there. It's just in the mid-range, it's slightly warm.
Okay.
LCD3s are about halfway between the twos and neutral, like the LCD-X is.
Okay.
And what I would advise for your salespeople or anyone watching this, if they want to demo our headphones and try to decide which one's best for them, what I usually do, like for example, at a trade show or someone comes to here to our facility and wants a demo, is I first tell them to listen to the LCD2. And then after that, I tell them to listen to an LCD-X if I can find one. No.
So in that regard, you're going from basically a warmer mid-range to a very neutral product.
Correct. And no, we're out of stock on X's.
That's okay.
Highly back ordered. So
that's a good sign.
Yep. So I usually tell customers, look, take a listen to the 2, then take a listen to the X. Tell me what you think. If they say they like the X, then they can listen to our X. If they don't want to spend that kind of money, they can listen to our new LCD1 at only $399, which is fairly neutral as well. Or they can go a little upmarket from the LCD-X to the MX4 or to our LCD4 or 4Zs. All
Okay.
those are relatively neutral. On the other hand, if the customer says, I like the 2s, then I say, okay, then let's do one last test. Take a listen to the 3s and see which one you like best.
Okay.
Because that's telling me that that particular person prefers something slightly warm in the mid-range. And everybody's different. Like, for example, in the recording industry world, we sell a huge amount of LCD-Xs to producers and mastering engineers. And most of them buy the X. And we don't really tell them to buy the X. They're the ones who come to us and say, hey, Elliot Shiner has an X, or so-and-so has an X. He told me to go get these, or Manny Moroccan has X. So I want to get some X's from you. However, we have people that are on the outside of that. For example, the mastering engineer, George Massenberg, who's very famous. He has our LCD3s.
Wow.
So that's slightly warm in the mid-range. And I just realized, as kind of an aside, so when I was in my first year of college, I was at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. And until they kicked me out. And but I had a band, and we had a chance to record. So we went to this recording studio in Baltimore, Maryland called Track Studios. And the guy who owned the studio and did the recording was George Massenberg.
Wow.
And then I came across him much later on in life again. And it was funny re-engaging. And another part of that thing is that band that we recorded there by George, I used to trade off the bass and guitar duties with another guy in the band who's Neil Portnow. Neil Portnow worked for Clive Davis and was Clive's secondhand guy, then worked for other people in the record industry, and for a long time had been head of the Grammys.
Okay.
He's the guy who came out during all the Grammy Awards and whatever, said, I'm Neil Portnow from the Grammys. So we were in a band together back then.
Oh man, that's awesome. Hey,
So
could you help?
What?
Could you help the folks that are listening? This impedance matching thing and so on and so forth. For those folks that don't know, kind of how does impedance work, and what should they be looking for to match up with a headphone, and how will they get the best sound from it, and that kind of thing?
That's really a great question, and it's not as simple an answer as I would like,
I realize that.
Probably the users and customers would like. So my first suggestion would be, if you write to our customer service department, just write to support@audeze.com, and we'll have a body of text we'll send you that says, here's the technical stuff. So if you have this impedance, this is the amount of power you need from the amplifier.
Okay.
So we can send you that. So you'd have all the technical information in front of you. So we're glad to do that to anyone, whether you own our headphones or not. Plus, you can simply Google it, and there are lots of places to find this online. However, on a much more practical level, if you have planar magnetic headphones, I think you need to look at having as powerful an amp as you can get to drive them.
Yes.
Now, somebody in the sales department may say, don't discourage people from buying planar magnetic headphones. But the reality of it is, even our LCD-Xs will sound okay if you plug them into a cell phone or your laptop, because sound will come out, you go, that sounds okay. But as I said earlier, they're not going to get up and dance.
Yep.
So you do need some power to drive them, but they don't need much. So, and nowadays there's lots of great headphone amplifiers for very little money, whether it's Matrix Digi, whether it's HiFi, Chord, whether it's topping of, periodic audio. They have a little amp called the Nickel, the size of a 9-volt battery, and that works great for all of our headphones, except for maybe the LCD4, which does need a lot of power.
One of the things we learn with apogees and those kind of things, as we discussed earlier, basically is that, an amplifier can make a monster difference in the way that speaker would sound. And your ear speakers have so much ability to sound great that if you really put the hammer to them, they can really go places.
Yep, and the more power you give them, typically the better they like it. But something like an AudioQuest Dragonfly is adequate for all this stuff.
Yep,
for
we've
those
seen
of
that
you
too.
who are, and for those of you who are producers or musicians, almost all those interface boxes, whether they're from Apogee or PreSonus, you name it, Yuri, Apollos, all those will drive all of our headphones fine.
That's awesome. Absolutely awesome. So what, y'all have a couple of new products out.
Yep.
You want to tell us a little bit about those?
Okay, so let's start with what I touched on a little earlier, which is the new LCD1.
Okay.
And this is only a $399 planar magnetic headphone.
Really good sounding product.
Oh, thank you. And it is very easy to drive. So unlike most of our headphones, this will sound really good just being driven off your laptop, your cell phone, whatever. But once again, if you've got like a Chord Mojo or an AudioQuest Dragonfly, it will improve the sound quality that you'll hear.
Yeah, I was amazed. I was amazed going from the phone and then to the Mojo with that.
Oh yeah.
We've got that on the headphone bar here, and it was really something.
And we do one little thing that may trick a customer at first, and that is we have special wiring for the headphone jacks that automatically figures out which one's left and right. So when you get the cable from us, the cables aren't marked left and right. And we don't do that as a test to frustrate you or anything. So it doesn't matter which side of the cable you plug in, it automatically knows if it's left or right.
That's awesome. I imagine the stories and jokes y'all have had about that, I'm sure are large and humorous.
A few, but just a few. All right. So the other thing we've got that's relatively new is the LCD GX.
Yep.
Now, we originally designed it for the high-end or ultimate audiophile PC gamer. So this has magnesium rings, and it has our 100mm driver, kind of similar to what we have in the 2, but it also comes with a boom mic and a mute switch on the cable. And perhaps more importantly, it comes with all the plug adapters. So it'll work with 4-pin connectors, like for your laptops or computers. Yep. And also comes with the reverser adapter, because as some of the viewers may have found, not everybody's 4-pin plug wiring is the same. Mm-hmm. There's 2 different versions. So we actually include that reversing adapter with this product. We also include a standard LCD series headphone cable. So this can be used for regular stereo headphone listening or gaming, or if you want something that's super high quality for your Skype, Zoom, or Microsoft Teams calls.
One thing I noticed too is like y'all sell the boom mic separately, and so you have all the accessories available if by chance a youngster was playing with them and wound up damaging them in some way, form, or shape. You have stuff readily available to get them back in shape.
Yep, no, definitely. Now we've had a couple of other new things. The Mobius isn't new, but we do have something coming up, which we just announced based on the Mobius, called the Penrose. And like the Mobius, Penrose is also one of those, how can I put it, illusionary geometric shapes.
Okay.
Well, Mobius is actually the Mobius strip, which is, never ending.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I think, Infinity's original
Yes,
Mobius,
it
right?
was.
And Penrose is another one of those types of illusions. It's like the triangle. It's not too different from actually the Audeze triangle, but you can Google Penrose and you'll see it. It's named after Roger Penrose, who is
Okay.
the mathematician. So anyway, the Penrose is based on the same size and shape as the Mobius, which has gotten rave reviews for its sound quality and performance. It's a little different. This is really designed for the gamer console market, whereas Mobius is designed for the PC market,
Yes.
as well as people who want to listen to Netflix binging or watching movies in surround sound via the USB cable. The Mobius can give that 5.1 or 7.1 surround sound.
Mm-hmm.
This is really designed for wireless use. So
Okay.
this comes with a dongle, USB dongle. Let me see if I've got one around here.
That's kind of a dedicated gaming.
Yeah. So this has a low latency USB dongle. So it runs at 2.4 gigahertz. Because regular Bluetooth is too slow. No matter who makes it, Bluetooth is way too slow. It has too much latency for the response times you need in gaming,
Okay.
or actually for what you need in making a recording to be able to punch in and out accurately. Bluetooth is too slow. You need to use a wired connection or low latency wireless.
Okay.
This actually has both Bluetooth 5.0 and low latency wireless built in.
Wow.
And perhaps more importantly, you can use both simultaneously at the same time.
Really?
So for example, you could be wearing these and playing and doing in-game chat. Hey, I just destroyed this tank and blah, blah, blah. And you could then pick up your cell phone or get an incoming call from one of your other friends and talk to them as well.
Holy smokes. And would the game still be going on in the background?
Yes.
Holy smokes.
Yep.
Wow.
And it also has an application that you can run on your Android phone or whatever, and tablet, and that'll let you change your own EQs.
Holy smokes. Well, that's multitasking.
Yep. And of course, this can also be used for your Skype, Zoom, and Microsoft Teams calls as well. So this is only going to be $299 retail.
Wow.
It starts shipping in about 4 weeks.
Okay. And the model of those again?
That's called the Penrose. And we actually have two models, by the way. I'm glad you mentioned that. So we have two models. One is for Microsoft Xbox and Windows, which is why we had this color combination.
Okay.
And it does include the Microsoft security chip. So it does truly work on the Xbox. Both
Okay.
the original Xbox, the new Xbox X, and the new Xbox Series S. So everything. Then we have one that has a blue stripe for the PlayStations, and that works with PlayStation 4, 5, and everything else. Macintosh, Windows, Nintendo Switch, all those.
I'll be darned.
So we have two different versions to choose from. They're the same price.
So are you a gamer?
Not particularly. I do some gaming, but so much else going on.
I understand.
I would get lost and not do anything else.
I on a rare occasion will go into our theater. We've got a PlayStation or an Xbox or something in there, and do a little bit of racing, and that's about it.
Well, we have a number of people here on the staff, especially two of our customer support people and another couple of guys here who are very serious gamers. As a matter of fact, we took over Shankar's, our CEO's office, which was the largest office in the building. We took that over last month and turned that into a huge high-end gaming room.
Oh, wow.
So you can go there. We have like what, 100-inch screen, and it's just crazy. And we also have audio networking there to do live game streaming and competitions and everything else. So we've really made a big push here to address the needs of the truly high-end gaming market.
You know, the one thing I've noticed in all this is that, people that own headphones and really enjoy them, I have a couple of pairs of them, actually 3 pairs of them, and I don't use headphones a lot. I do when I run and I get on a plane. But I mean, I have a magnificent stereo at home, so that's part of the reason I don't. But you end up finding most people own several pairs of headphones. And we found that people own them for different uses, different kinds of music, this one to go with this amp, this one to go with that amp, so on and so forth. And it kind of goes back to that very personalized kind of thing. And it was a great comment you made about that.
Well, also, it's just like in the music business. How many guitar players do you know of that only have one guitar? Right?
And how often do they change them during a show?
Right. And also, I think you've touched upon another important point, and that is the dynamic of music listening has changed dramatically over the decades. In the early days, what you would do is you had a nice system at home, you invite friends over, you'd share your music with them by inviting them over and spinning records or discs or whatever. And that's how you would share music. Over the past 2 decades, especially, music's become this intensely personal, direct experience that never existed before. And now if you share music, it's via online or gifting somebody iTunes or whatever. And that's how it's shared music. But if you think about it, in the old days, how often did you listen to your stereo at home? A couple of hours here, a couple of hours there. But now people are listening to music, what, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day.
Absolutely.
So people are absorbing and experiencing much more music and so many different kinds of music than were ever offered previously. So I look at it as being a fantastic situation that's come up over the past few decades.
Yep. And I think it all got started in a big way just from the iPod.
Yeah, iPod had a lot to do with it, absolutely. Yep. And availability of streaming and overall just the personal experience revolution. Maybe that's a term for it.
Yep.
And
well,
by the way, getting back to a couple of our products, we do have a few new changes to some existing products that your viewers might be the first to know about.
Awesome.
So first of all, this is our LCD XC. Now, previously we talked about the LCD-X, which is actually our most popular headphone, our best selling headphone. And a lot of those customers tend to be recording engineers and producers. The closed back version is called the XC. This is the exact same headphone, but it's closed back, obviously. But it's a little different in the sense that we actually have some special sound absorbing material that is on the back side of the driver, between that and the actual back of the ear cup. Okay. So that helps absorb the back wave of the driver, which gives the XCs a much larger spatial image or a wider sound stage that you would normally expect from a closed back headphone. So we've been making these with we've been making these with wood cups over the past couple of years. Originally they were Bubinga, but we had to stop using those because of the rare woods problems. Then we went to maple a while ago, and we just recently stopped using the maple. Once again, because of not so much availability, but getting people to make these to our specification and making it to as tight a tolerance as we really need going forward. So we changed that. So now we make it with a carbon fiber weave cup.
Very nice.
Bring it up here.
That looks great.
I don't know if you'll actually see the weave in this light or whatever.
Sure can.
So everything else is the same about the product. It's just that this cup material has changed.
Okay.
So that's one thing that's different. The other thing that's different is the LCD2 closed back. So originally, and I don't have the original model here, the cup had a white V here, upside down V or our A.
Mm-hmm.
So we changed that. So this sort of has a maize finish or marble finish with the Audeze logo across it. So there's no other difference in performance. This is the exact same material, only the finish and the logo placement has changed.
Okay.
So
on the
previous, the same, product's the same.
On the previous headphone, where you went from the wood, from the one type of wood that was a little bit rare, and then went to the maple, and then you went to, I guess, what is that material made from? What you went to?
It's a special polymer.
Okay. And have you found a good difference in the sound quality of that, or?
You know, we thought we might, but what happened is we realized that because we have the special sound deadening material on the back side of the driver, between that and the inside of the ear cup, as long as we had about the same hardness scale in the material, it didn't matter what material we used.
Very good. Hi-Fi in my background in the crate was starting to make a little rumbling. So
All right.
we'll see if he stays with us here.
Well, it seems like he's up 3 dB.
He is, sir. You have let's see, an LCD 24.
Yes. And I don't have, let me see if I've got it somewhere lying around here. So we kind of made a special run of a product. No, I'm sorry. I don't have one here.
Okay.
It is something we kind of do as special runs, so we don't always have them in stock.
Okay.
So that kind of has LCD2 type film, but with the magnet structure of the LCD4. So it has a little different sound than the LCD4. So how can I put it? Just a little different flavor.
Okay. Probably a little quicker in that regard, just simply because you have a lot more magnet on it, or?
No, it wouldn't be any quicker. And let me put it this way, it wouldn't be no, forget it. Technically,
okay.
You couldn't measure it and no one would hear it.
Okay, fair enough. You know, it is amazing when I look at these things, the making the diaphragms and that kind of thing in the factory. I think it's pretty awesome that y'all are able to do almost everything that you make right there in the factory, and that's pretty cool.
Well, we've had to. We have a special technique to actually make these drivers, and we actually had to use not just special machines, but we actually had to write our own software because the machines weren't originally designed to do what we do.
Mm-hmm. So where do you see this headphone market going, or even you guys as a company going, as you kind of march down the road?
Good question. And it's hard to answer. I think, first of all, personal electronics are just going to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's headphones or anything else, but personal audio is just going to keep growing and growing. Whether it manifests itself as in-ears, on-ears, what type of materials are used, what type of technologies are used, what is the medium to serve up the audio. That whole side of the business is still going to grow. I think there is other things that are now spinning off from the headphone business, which may, how can I put it, be tangent to other types of uses or markets. For example, impaired listening.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if you notice, there are a number of headphone companies that are not making in-ears per se, but making assisted listening devices,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to, how can I put it, a full-blown hearing aid.
Well, it's amazing how we've seen some of the custom-made things that you can actually change the kind of DSP on it and that kind of thing. Yes. As well. And pretty amazing how those can actually change as your hearing changes with you. And I've found that technology to be pretty amazing. We're getting down to where we can make something so tiny. And I was, with Richard Grado on a HiFi Chats a few weeks ago, and they were talking about making their diaphragms, and I was just thought it was really interesting just how tiny those things are, and just how difficult.
Yeah, especially for their the phono cartridges.
Mm-hmm.
What they have to do for the phono cartridges. It's just amazing that they can do it. So what were we going to say, Alan?
I remember being at the Rega factory, and I had to make my own cartridge.
Oh.
And I failed miserably. So that was a lot tougher than I thought it was, especially when you get down there for the first time at your cartridge and you start doing, and I'm not a big shaker. So it was like, oh my gosh.
Interesting.
Yep. Well, listen, we're going to take a question or two here in just a minute. I know we've already had a couple that we've gotten answered already. But anyway, I'd like to ask you guys to like and subscribe out there. And also, if you will, go to HiFiBuys.com and sign up for our newsletter. We will have, shall we say, a playlist out there with the music that was mentioned today that also includes music that has been mentioned during the previous HiFi Chats, the 21 of them. Also, if you will, again, feel free to ask questions, and let's just be kind to everybody out there and shall we say, I really love having Mark Cohen here. You are, I did not quite expect the breadth or depth of all that you've been in. And I thought the comment earlier was very appropriate about how we all need to get out and do something. But anyway, it is, I can certainly understand why people were very kind to you, and your obviously interest and passion for learning and moving forward is there. And I love that about people that are visionaries within companies, because it means that they're willing to try things. And very important.
Oh, thank you. Well, really, all of us in this industry, the main key is how can we make products that better deliver that emotional experience of the music?
Yep.
Because that's what it's all about. Not about the technology per se, but how can you make that music important and emotional for the listener?
Yep. And, we have seen, artists, like you said earlier, artists that have the ability to reach you a little easier than others. And that's always different for who's listening. And I think that's it's just one of the beautiful things about music. There's something for everybody. And I can't imagine anyone that doesn't love music. Some of them don't quite get into it quite as deep as us, but I certainly understand that. So let me see. I got a question here for you. And let's see, this is from Dave W. Hey, Dave, how are you? What products do you have in your personal audio system?
Oh, at one time or another, I've owned just about everything, it seems.
I've been out there myself, so I get it.
Yeah, everything from obviously the Magnepans originally to KLH9 electrostatics to JBL monitors of all different kinds, of all different vintages, quad electrostatics, electronic.
Which quads did you have?
What?
Which quads did you have?
Oh, the 57s.
Awesome. That was one of my favorite speakers, even to this day. And the last pair that I got in on trade, I was going to keep them, and I just didn't have any place to put them.
Yep, until you wanted to crank up the bass.
Yes, yeah. But they were just so cool. I mean, just a really neat speaker.
Yeah, and there's audio research. There's like lying around here, there's a Mytek Manhattan 2 preamp and DAC. Behind me, we've got the Hollow Spring May DAC, an Azure amplifier, but also linear tube audio. Mm-hmm. They're electrostatic and regular headphone amplifier. And of course, on the other side, I got a chord tabletop and the M scaler, which is pretty amazing. And our original Bascom King designed King amplifier. That's a hybrid amp. And a resonance and slab DAC, the Mirus. Obviously, tape recorder. I got an SPL phonitor, which is nice for the not the surround sound, but the matrix switching. And there's Pathos audio. There's a bunch of stuff. Speakers. There's got to be. I've got a pair of Kef Ref 1s. Dynaudio Evidence Temptations. Some Martin Logans. So a bunch of stuff. And it's so much better these days than the good old days, or as I like to call it, the good old days when times were bad. Now there's so much good stuff to choose from. And what I found is, at when you're in the good part of the market or the good part of the technology, most stuff is really, really good or excellent. It's just a matter of what do you like better. And with speakers and headphones, there can be some synergies in amplifiers because of the output impedance of the amp, whether it's current or more voltage or this or that. All those things can affect it. If you have huge back EMF in a speaker, then the amount of negative feedback in the amp design can make it a difference. There are those kinds of synergies, but still, at the better product end of the market, I think it's more a matter of differences rather than being better or worser.
Okay.
So does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And I agree with you. There is a ton of good product out there, and there is, sometimes some real synergy among certain products and that kind of thing too that we've seen. I think this tube versus solid state thing is a bit overblown. I think there's good amps in both, and so I'm happy to support both and do. I also think we can make a bad sounding tube amp and a bad sounding solid state amp. So it's really about how it's executed, as we discussed earlier.
And on a personal level, I was going to say, on a personal level, if you're talking about what equipment I have, over the years, I've come to the point where I want stuff I don't have to deal with very much. In other words, I want my music as immediate gratification. If I've got to worry about changing a tube, doing a bias here, or I've got to move the preamp over here a little bit to get the sound, it's like I'm kind of past that.
Yep.
Not that that was good or bad, but rather, I just look for something where I can, when I want the music, I want it to sound great, and I just want to flip a switch and turn a knob.
Yep. When I want to feel good, I want to feel good now.
Yeah, I don't want to get out the tube tester. I don't want to get out the voltmeter. I don't want to get out the hammer and align it.
I'm with you in that in every way. So I have a personal question before we are going to get into, I think, the last question we have. But so I have talked a lot about in these HiFi chats about noise. And in headphones, what is the biggest noise issue that you have, and how do you overcome that? Because, like in speakers, we have crossovers. Certain crossovers tend to make a little bit of noise as it gets to the drivers that is either time smear and that kind of thing that's seen as noise. And then you end up having, ringing that happens, or drivers that kind of move a lot in a sense, so they're not as giving you, I guess, a pistonic kind of view on what's going on. And I'm just curious in headphones if there is such a thing as, kind of a noise issue that comes up because of the cone or the ear pads or anything along that lines.
Good question. You don't have the typical, because of our driver design, there's no crossover in it. Obviously,
right.
The Sennheiser headphones would be the same way, the Bayers. If you have in-ears with balanced armature drivers, you could have multiple crossovers, and that then creates all the crossover issues you would typically have with speakers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the noise issues tend to be more on the physical or mechanical side rather than the electronic side.
Okay.
And by that, I mean, I think with headphones, you start hearing noises of maybe the, connections between different mechanical parts. Are things rattling? Are you hearing resonance in the headband? Is that affecting the sound quality? How about is the headphone cable microphonic? There's a lot of problems with that. If you crank them up and you're moving a lot of air, then yes, you could have some acoustic noise created by air movement through ports, whether it be closed. Some closed back headphones have a port in them.
Mm-hmm.
Open backs don't. But once again, we actually designed the grills here for the airflow. So if you see some grills that are very, very finely designed with crazy dots and whatever, maybe that has a derogatory effect on the sound quality. Or maybe not, depends how they were designed. You can easily measure and test for the resonant quality of the grills.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't have the typical electrical noise problems you have with the speaker, amplifier, preamp, blah, blah, blah interface in headphones. That would be my view. I think the biggest noise you have is people like me who have tinnitus.
Yes.
That's the noise level. My ears are ringing. So
that's a tough one.
Yeah. So like I said, it's mostly physical, mechanical issues as opposed to the electronic issues.
Okay. That's awesome. Thank you for that explanation. I was curious of it and didn't actually write the question down, and wanted to make sure I asked it. I know I've had one time where I had a cable that would actually make a lot of noise.
Yep.
And I was like, didn't somebody listen to this? So, okay. So, what are your favorite guitars? Someone has asked us.
My favorite guitars. I won't claim to ever be a really great guitar player. I was simply lucky that I was in a lot of the right places at the right time. And I was able to make a living doing studio work and touring and whatever. But I was one of those people where the guitar had to feel right to me. And what was frustrating to me is I'd come across these players. It didn't matter what guitar they had in their hands. They sounded phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, I'll take David Lindley. David Lindley could pick up anything. He could pick up a bassinet and it would probably sound great in his hands. Wow. You know, with me, it didn't matter whether it was a Les Paul, a 335, a Strat, or whatever. If it didn't have the right touch to me, mm-hmm. I had a really difficult time. Maybe that's one of the things that separates the really excellent players from just the punters such as myself. But right now I've got a Gibson 355 with a flame maple body around. I've got a hollow body Strat made out of mahogany I had made by the famous luthier John Carruthers. And that has a graphite neck, by the way. And by the way, graphite necks, they never go out of tune. I couldn't believe it. Every time I pick the guitar up, it's still in tune. Wow. I've got some basses because I played bass a lot as well. I had Stu Spector of Spector electric basses. I had him custom make me a matching fretted and fretless bass.
Holy smokes.
I could never play them well, but they looked really cool together.
Well, I love the tone of a guitar. I own 2 or 3, but I can't play with beams. So I have friends that come over and play.
I have a lot of favorites. Ironically enough, now that I think about it, most of the time when I was at Fender, I was playing more Gibson instruments. And then when I left Fender, I think I started playing more Fender instruments. I don't know why.
Isn't that weird?
Just change of times, change about what you play and what you're into in that particular part of your life. That's all.
So I've got another question here from SED Dent. And how are you? We appreciate you asking the question. I'm curious to know what kind of influence did Mark have for music for his kids?
Oh,
great question.
I just realized. So my first child was my daughter. And I actually remember I would play Miles Davis in a silent way, if you're familiar with that track.
Yes.
So I would regularly rock her to sleep with that track almost every night.
Wow. So
maybe that's why she's crazy now, but I'm not sure that was good parenting now that I think back about it. But,
that's hilarious. Oh my gosh.
But if nothing else, I figure she might have a good sense of time, because I don't know if any viewers remember that track, but In a Silent Way is about 16 minutes long, if I recall. And Tony Williams never skips a beat. And it's just amazing. It's such a beautiful track anyway. And then also off near that would be Sketches of Spain from Miles Davis.
Okay. And does she listen to music today? Is she a Miles Davis fan?
No, she listens to all the gaming music soundtracks. So my theory as a parent is that your children are always reactionary.
Yes.
So in other words, if you were like a rock musician, your kids are going to grow up to be accountants. And
if you were an accountant, they'd grow up to be a rock musician.
Maybe that's why the alternative generations seem to get along so well. The grandparents and grandkids get along, and the parents and kids don't. Maybe. Anyway,
that's interesting. I skip that generation. You're the same people. I love that. All right. So Dave W. again, this is a great question as well. With all the things you have done and seen, what is still on your bucket list?
Oh, wow. If it was still around, I would do the Paris-Dakar motorcycle rally, or the car part of the rally. So if any of the viewers are familiar with the Paris to Dakar rally, it's both trucks, motorcycles, cars. I would want to do that. I may not live through it, but I would want to do that.
I've had a family member that's gone down and been in the Bajas, so that was pretty amazing. So not the same thing, but it's has some similarities, I guess. So, all right. So Joe C., any plans on a replacement for the King headphone amp in the future?
That's something we always think about, and we developed it really as a personal project. So when we started developing a new generation of headphones and the new magnet technology. We want to do a really great headphone amp, and we connected with Bascom King and Arnie Nudell, as a matter of fact.
Wow.
And I had originally met Arnie way back in the old Infinity days. So we got everybody go along, and Bascom had just come up with this idea for this circuit. And we looked at it and said, well, tell you what, do you mind if we play with that circuit and turn it into a product? And he said, it's great, I'd be glad to do it. And Bascom was very helpful. And so that's how we came up with the King. And it was really designed originally to drive the LCD4s. That was its real raison d'etre, or reason to exist. We keep looking at doing that again, but nowadays so many other people make great headphone amplifiers.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we're still a relatively small company. We only have about maybe 40, 45 people in the entire company. That's the production line, that's the driver line, that's everything. So for us to take our eyes off the ball of making more headphone designs and improving those, to go off and do the electronics, it's more of a distraction for us these days.
It's that shiny stuff.
Yeah. So I would say, if I want to put on my corporate management hat right now, I'd say that is a distraction from our core business, especially since there's so much great stuff out there, whether it's a DCS Bartok or the Core Hugo stuff or the Nagra or the SPL or the Pathos or the Burst. I mean, I don't know if the world needs just another headphone amp from Audeze. Whereas on the other hand, we have a number of new technologies we've developed over the past 2 to 3 years that you will start seeing in the next 3 to 4 months coming from Audeze. So some of this stuff has been delayed because of the COVID-19, but we have some really exciting new technology headphone products coming out over the next few months.
Okay. I would dive further, but I already tell it's not coming out. So I'm an observer.
Stay tuned.
Oh, gosh. I appreciate the tease. It's pretty awesome. And, I just want to thank you so much for your time today. This has been really fun. I know that I've had a lot of comments that I've seen personally, and even getting some through my cell phone here about folks saying how much they enjoyed your chat and your experience. And you've really brought
the opportunity.
Well, you've really brought a lot to the table, and we appreciate that very much. So folks, if you will out there, please like and subscribe to our channel. Go to HiFiBuys.com, sign up for our newsletter. Next week, we'll have Eno with Rune. And Mark, did you have anything you wanted to say in parting?
No, just thanks to everyone for tuning in. And we're glad to meet everyone. Okay. And thank you for your time, Alan. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's good to meet you as well. And shall we say, we really look forward to our relationship with HiFi Buys with Audeze as we go down the road. You're a great company, and shall we say, the following is a pretty loyal following that you have out there. And I love companies that have a loyal following. It means you're doing the right things. Yeah,
and I'll be calling you back for your opening order for the new products soon, okay?
I look forward to that call, sir.
All right.
Can we Zoom it? Yeah. I'll have a different shirt on then.
So will I. I'll have to actually have this washed.
Awesome. Well, folks, this is Alan Jones and Mark Cohen with Audeze. And this has been HiFi Chats number 22. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.